Hello everyone, today I will tell you about the movie Sicario 2 Soldado. Enjoy watching. American border guards spotted a group of Mexicans who were illegally trying to cross the border. The military surrounded them on all sides and ordered them to lie down on the ground. But one intruder ran to the side. He took something out of his bag and began to pray. When the border guards approached him, the man activated the bomb and blew himself up, injuring the military. The next day, 4 suspicious people entered the supermarket and also took turns blowing themselves up, killing 15 innocent people. The U.S. Secretary of Defense said that terrorists will not intimidate them, and soon the customers will be punished. We see American paratroopers landing in the Somali Gulf. The squad quietly eliminates one pirate after another. Only one was left alive for questioning. This will be done by CIA officer Matt Graver. Bashir thought that now he would be tortured, but Matt has different methods. He showed Bashir his house, filmed from satellite. If the pirate does not begin to answer questions, he will be blown up along with all his relatives. Bashir, having seen the footage from the supermarket, said that he had nothing to do with it. These are all people from Yemen, ISIS. Graver knows this. He also knows that Bashir brought these people to Mexico on his ship. It remains to find out who helped him and paid for this service. But the criminal is silent. Graver assumed that his brother was walking in the yard of Bashir's house and gave the order to strike. In a second, the house was destroyed, and Graver immediately switched to the next target, the car in which Bashir's other brother was riding. Bashir finally surrendered, and Graver found out that the Reyes cartel helped the terrorists cross the Mexican border. In this regard, the agent was called back to the United States. Miguel Hernandez's family lives in Texas, very close to the border. Instead of going to school, the boy got into his cousin Hector's car. A bandit wants to recruit a schoolboy to help the cartel and guide illegal immigrants across the border. He knows both banks of the river very well and can freely cross the border himself. The cartel will pay him well for this. And the boy agreed because he was in debt. The cartels will be listed as terrorist organizations, and this will help the military to act. The most effective way would be to start a war between the largest cartels. Their main target is Carlos Reyes. Graver offered to kidnap his 16-year-old daughter, and then the war would definitely begin. From a friend, Graver ordered combat helicopters, weapons, equipment, and an assault group. All this will be paid for by the U.S. Treasury. The scene takes us to Bogota, the capital of Colombia. Graver found an old acquaintance, Alejandro there. It is this mercenary who will be able to perform the dirtiest work for the CIA, and at the same time avenge his family. Alejandro went to Mexico City, where he cold-bloodedly shot the main lawyer of the Matamoros cartel and everyone who was in the car with him. The news immediately began to say that the lawyer was killed on the order of a rival cartel, and apparently, we will have to wait for the start of a war between criminal organizations. The squad's next target is Carlos Reyes' daughter, Isabel. The girl is busy sorting out her relationship with another schoolgirl. She brutally beat a classmate and appeared before the director. He would like to expel the hooligan, but somehow he doesn't want to risk his life. On the way home, Isabel is accompanied by an escort of several cars. The warriors gathered to act rudely and loudly. First, they jammed the cellular signal, then blew up the car that was driving in front. The Americans simply crashed into the car with Isabel, and pulled the girl out of the car and threw her into their car. Alejandro shackled the driver and ordered him to tell the boss that this was Matamoros' revenge for the murder of their lawyer. Miguel completed the first task. He drove the car across the border and received payment from a man working in a supermarket. Isabel was taken by plane to an American airbase and then transferred to a car and taken away somewhere. From a satellite, the military can see Reyes' house in full view. They switched to the abduction site and saw 4 corpses, although they only killed 2. 2 more were shackled. On the replay, Graver saw that the witnesses had been shot by a police officer. Isabel was brought to a house on the outskirts. After some time, they took off her bag, headphones, and glasses and locked her in the bathroom. Then a performance was staged. Supposedly, the bandits were attacked by American Special Forces, and Alejandro found the frightened girl in the bathroom. The mercenary began to ask her questions. Apparently, he doesn't know who is sitting in front of him. Alejandro promised Isabel that he would soon return her to her family. Graver is going to throw the girl into some Mexican police station in Matamoros, so that her father will have to fight her off. The agents almost hit Miguel in his car, and he remembered Alejandro's face. Hector brought the boy to the station and introduced him to Gela. If Miguel successfully brings Mexicans across the border, he will earn more than his father did in a year. But if he upsets Gaul, he will be chopped into small pieces. Alejandro told Isabel that she would be handed over to the Mexican army and they would take her home. They put a bulletproof vest on the girl and put her in a Humvee. There are 10 cars moving along the highway with only desert around. Mexican police are riding in front and behind the column. Soon the asphalt road ended and the car was enveloped in dust. Visibility deteriorated, forcing the military to rely on the drone's eyes. At the last moment, they were warned about the attack. The Humvee and Isabel began to machine gun the Mexican police who were driving in front. American military vehicles were destroyed by grenade launchers. Aviation helped and destroyed the attackers. Our heroes left the car and shot the enemy machine gunners. Isabel also did not want to stay in the car and climbed under it, but then ran away somewhere. There were also Mexican policemen behind, 2 of whom were wounded. They asked not to shoot, but suddenly they opened fire themselves, so the soldiers eliminated them. Only now did Graver discover that the girl was missing. Alejandro said that he would find her himself. The rest need to leave because more police cars are approaching here. Isabel is simply wandering through the desert. She took off her bulletproof vest. Police cars caught up with the soldiers. Graver simply shot them with his rifle. Without slowing down, the Americans crossed the border and returned to the United States. The girl stopped the car, and it was a mistake, because the driver turned out to be one of the militants who was supposed to kill her. Fortunately, Alejandro arrived in time. He knocked out the Mexican and ordered Isabel to get into the car. She guessed that this man participated in her abduction. The boss ran into Graver. Afghanistan is one thing. Starting a war with your neighbor is another thing. The president decided to curtail the operation. Graver failed in his mission because he was supposed to start a war between the cartels and not kill 24 Mexican police officers, even corrupt ones. Alejandro and the girl came across a house where a deaf-mute family lived. The mercenary knows sign language. He asked to feed them and provide them with accommodation for the night. The stranger knows who this girl is. He saw it on the news, but still agreed to help them. Graver was contacted by the Secretary of Defense. The kidnapped girl saw all phases of the operation and the shooting of Mexican police officers. She threatens national security. There is a big risk that Isabel will fall into the wrong hands. Therefore, as soon as he and Alejandro cross the border, they both need to be eliminated. It was all wrong from the start, because 2 of the 4 people on death row were U.S. citizens. They came from New Jersey. Graver called Alejandro and ordered him to get rid of the girl, but the mercenary refused. He, on the contrary, asked the CIA to help smuggle Isabel across the border. But Graver can no longer help. Alejandro is now on his own. Meanwhile, Miguel is preparing to complete his first serious task. He led the illegals across the river. After waiting for a border guard helicopter to fly past, Miguel led the Mexicans to the truck. Having handed them over, the boy got into the car of some American woman and received a salary from her. After talking with Alejandro, Isabel realized that he was the same prosecutor whose family was killed by her father. The man buried his weapon in the ground. He still won't be able to cross the border with it. Moreover, it is difficult to do this with Isabel. From now on, the girl will be called Karina. She cut her hair, and Alejandro installed a GPS on her boot in case she got lost. This signal was recorded by the CIA. Graver volunteered to deal with his man himself. Alejandro and the girl arrived at the bus station where all the illegal immigrants gather. Graver and his team are heading here. Alejandro bargained with Hector for appearances and paid him $2,000 and insisted that he and his daughter be in the same group. Miguel looked out the window and recognized the guy from the car. He immediately told Hector about this. Alejandro and the girl got on the bus and went to the border. But at some point the bus stopped, and 4 people pointed guns at Alejandro at once. Everyone else was ordered to leave the vehicle. Miguel came in here and confirmed that he had seen this guy in Texas. But Gala recognized the daughter of the head of the cartel and ordered her to get into his car. Alejandro suggested that the bandits not take risks, otherwise they and their relatives would suffer. This girl is too dangerous for them. Gala thinks about what to do. It all depends on who Alejandro works for. He approached Isabel and she lied that the man worked for her father, Carlos Reyes. And it was a mistake. They knocked Alejandro out and threw a t-shirt over his head, and Isabel's mouth was taped shut. They were taken to an unknown direction. Graver is watching the bandits from a helicopter. A group of criminals stopped in the middle of the desert. Alejandro was thrown onto the sand. One of the boys should execute him. Gala handed the gun to Jose. This is the only way he can become a Sicario. But the boy lowered his weapon. He is not capable of killing a person. Then Gala killed him himself. Miguel was handed the gun next. Tied up, Alejandro desperately tries to crawl away from his approaching death. But Miguel approached him and without hesitation shot him in the head. This happened before Isabel's eyes. Graver also froze for a while. But, gathering his thoughts, the agent ordered everything to be cleared. At some point, Miguel, for some reason, jumped out of the pickup truck and continued on foot. He hasn't become a killer yet. The guy shot Alejandro in the cheeks, and the next day, he woke up. The helicopters caught up with the cars and hovered over them. One helicopter blocked the road, and the Americans began clearing it. Gala pointed a gun at the girl, but Graver, without hesitation, shot at them. Despite orders, Graver allowed Isabel to live. He'll make sure she goes into witness protection. Alejandro tore the tape off the dead guy's belt and took the t-shirt off his head. When he walked through the desert, he reached cars with shot bandits. Alejandro got into one of them and drove to the border. Another car got on his tail, and when the bandits drove up close and tried to shoot him, he threw a grenade into the car. Alejandro was close to losing consciousness, but he still pulled himself together and continued on his way. The girl cannot come to her senses. Her life will never be the same. A year later, we see Miguel covered in tattoos and with an arrogant face. Suddenly, he saw a ghost. Alejandro recovered and found the young bandit, but will not take revenge on him. If a guy wants to become a Sicario, the killer will help him with this.